What happens when a single accident changes everything? Dramatic pause. One moment of vulnerability. One locked door left open. And suddenly, the boy you thought was your straight best friend sees you in a way you never imagined. This is not just a BL webtoon scenario. This is a yaoi manhwa-worthy story of confusion, closeness, and love discovered where you least expect it. Our story begins in a quiet city apartment where Ethan, a 20-year-old university student majoring in literature, lives his simple but observant life. Ethan has always been the kind of person who notices the little things: footsteps in a hallway, the hesitation in someone's laugh, the way silence can reveal more than words. And at the center of Ethan's world has always been David, his childhood best friend. David is tall, athletic, and charming, with that easy kind of confidence that makes people gravitate toward him. He's the type who joins every soccer game, gets invited to every party, and never seems to struggle with what to say. To everyone else, David is the golden boy. To Ethan, he's the boy who never let him eat lunch alone, who carried his backpack when it was too heavy, who always said, "You're fine just the way you are." They've been inseparable since childhood, and though Ethan has harbored feelings deeper than friendship for years, he's learned to bury them, because David, as far as Ethan knows, is straight, very straight. The two of them lived near each other while attending university. It's common for Ethan to crash at David's dorm after late-night study sessions or games, and David often treats Ethan's apartment like his second home. Their bond is strong, effortless, full of loyalty built over decades. But the thing about growing up is that small moments can change the dynamic of even the strongest friendships. A glance that lingers too long, a touch that means more than it should, and sometimes an accident neither of you planned for. And that accident came one night, the night David walked into Ethan's room without knocking. And Ethan, completely, unavoidably, was naked. It happened so fast, Ethan barely had time to react. He'd just gotten out of the shower, steam still clinging to his skin, hair damp and dripping. He thought he was alone in his apartment. His towel was across the room. He was mid-step when the door creaked open. "Hey, Ethan, do you have—" David's voice froze. His entire body froze, and so did Ethan's. The silence was deafening. Ethan's eyes went wide, every nerve in his body screaming at him to move, to cover himself, to do something. But for a split second, he didn't. He couldn't. David stood there in the doorway, eyes locking on him, shock written all over his face. "David!" Ethan yelped, scrambling for the nearest cover. His towel slipped through his wet fingers, and he fumbled like it was the most important exam of his life. His heart raced so loudly he thought it might echo through the room. Sorry, David blurted, turning his back so fast he nearly slammed into the wall. "I didn't know you were, His words tangled, clumsy in a way Ethan had never heard before. "I thought you were still at class," Ethan snapped, face burning as he finally clutched the towel to his waist. No, my class ended early. I came by to grab, notes. I didn't." David's voice cracked, and he cut himself off, hand pressed against the doorframe as though steadying himself. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sounds were Ethan's shallow breathing and the quiet hum of the bathroom fan. Finally, Ethan croaked out, "It's fine, just close the door." David hesitated, then obeyed, pulling it shut with an almost painful slowness. Ethan sank onto the edge of his bed, the mattress dipping beneath his weight as if even it understood the heaviness in his chest. His towel clung damply to his skin, not doing much to shield him from the storm of feelings crashing inside. He pressed it tighter against himself, as though hiding from a world that had suddenly become too bright, too sharp. His breathing came in quick, shallow bursts, chest rising and falling like a trapped bird. Embarrassment was the first emotion to strike, so fierce it left a sting across his cheeks. It wasn't the simple, fleeting embarrassment of tripping on a step or fumbling a word in class. This was deeper, hotter, and crueler. It gnawed at him with claws of memory, replaying every detail of the scene only minutes ago. He could still see David in the doorway, the way his friend's eyes had widened, pupils catching the dim light of the room like glass, the frozen posture caught between entering and leaving, between apology and something else. Ethan's stomach twisted at the memory. He'd been exposed, vulnerable, in a way he never intended. Yet what haunted him most wasn't the exposure itself. It was the look in David's eyes, not disgust, not amusement, not even pity. It was something unspoken, something unnamed, something Ethan didn't dare hope was real. That fleeting moment of stillness clung to him, as though David had seen past skin and bone and towel, into something Ethan kept hidden even from himself. The more Ethan thought about it, the more unbearable the evening became. The silence of his room pressed down like a weight, every tick of the clock on his desk a reminder that David was still out there, probably replaying the same scene in his mind. Ethan wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the shadows of his bedroom and never emerge again. But he also wanted answers. Why hadn't David laughed? Why hadn't he turned away with awkward muttering, or teased him with the kind of offhand joke straight boys always made? Instead, there had been stillness, a silence filled with meaning Ethan couldn't decipher. When he finally mustered the courage to leave his room, fully dressed in jeans and a loose shirt, he found David on the couch. The television flickered in the darkened living room, colors dancing across David's face. He sat rigidly, the remote in his hand, fingers tightening and loosening in small, restless motions. The screen flipped channels rapidly, each image gone in an instant, as though he wasn't really watching, just hiding. When their eyes met across the room, Ethan's heart stumbled. David looked up too quickly, as if startled, as if caught in a thought he shouldn't have been having. The air between them thickened. Ethan's throat tightened, and he quickly glanced away, pretending to adjust his sleeve. David was the first to break the silence. His voice was careful, almost too careful, like a man tiptoeing over fragile glass. About earlier, he began, and the words carried a weight that filled the room. His shoulders stiffened as he spoke, his gaze flicking toward Ethan and then away again. "Forget it," Ethan cut in, the words tumbling out faster than he intended. His tone was sharp, too sharp, as though he could sever the entire memory with sheer force. He hated the way his voice cracked, betraying the nerves he wanted so badly to hide. He wanted to erase the look in David's eyes, erase the echo of that moment in the bedroom, erase the way his heart had betrayed him by leaping at the sight. But even as he said it, even as the words "forget it" left his lips, Ethan knew forgetting was impossible. David's jaw tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line. He set the remote down slowly, deliberately, and leaned back against the couch. His eyes didn't leave Ethan now, steady and unreadable. The television carried on in the background, some game show host laughing, an audience clapping. But the sound felt distant, hollow, meaningless compared to the weight of David's silence. Ethan could feel that gaze again, intense, searching, the same one that had pinned him earlier when he was standing there in nothing but a towel. The hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen was the only real sound between them. It buzzed steadily, filling the silence like a second heartbeat, and in its rhythm, Ethan realized how loud his own breathing was. He swallowed, throat dry, and forced himself to move further into the room. Each step felt exaggerated, his body heavy and awkward, as though the space itself resisted his presence. He sat on the armchair opposite David, careful to keep distance, careful not to brush against him. The fabric of the chair scratched faintly under his palm, grounding him, reminding him that this was real and not just some fevered dream. He wanted to speak, to explain, to laugh it off, to beg David not to think less of him, but the words tangled in his chest. Every possible sentence seemed wrong, too much, too little, too revealing. So he said nothing. David finally exhaled, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet. "You don't have to be embarrassed," he said softly, his tone stripped of its usual bravado. There was no teasing, no casual humor to mask his meaning. Just quiet honesty. The simplicity of it startled Ethan more than if David had mocked him outright. His fingers curled into the fabric of his jeans, nails pressing faint crescents into the denim. Ethan wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the comfort. But the memory of David's eyes lingered, that unreadable flicker, that something Ethan couldn't name. "Easy for you to say," Ethan murmured, his voice low, almost drowned by the television's empty chatter. His words carried more weight than he meant, more truth than he wanted to admit. David's gaze softened, but he didn't reply. Instead, he looked back at the screen, though it was clear he still wasn't watching. His hands fidgeted in his lap, restless, betraying the calm of his posture. For the first time, Ethan realized David might be just as unsettled as he was. That thought sent a shiver through him, equal parts fear and something else. Something warmer, something dangerous. Minutes passed, each one stretched thin by silence. Ethan's mind screamed with questions he couldn't ask. Did David see him differently now? Did that look in his eyes mean what Ethan thought it did? Or was he simply imagining things, twisting reality into the shape of his secret desires? He shifted in his seat, suddenly restless, but David's quiet presence held him still. The room felt smaller than ever, the space between them charged, heavy with words unsaid. David frowned. "I didn't mean to. I said forget it," Ethan snapped, sharper than intended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. From then on, everything felt different. The conversation stumbled. Laughter didn't come as easily. Ethan found himself replaying the moment in his mind at night, unable to shake the image of David's frozen expression. David started acting strangely. At first, Ethan thought it was his imagination, paranoia born from the towel incident that still haunted him at night. But as the days passed, the changes became undeniable. David lingered longer than he used to. He would come by Ethan's apartment after classes, claiming he was bored, or that his dorm was too noisy, or that Ethan's coffee tasted better. And maybe that was true, but Ethan couldn't ignore the way David's eyes sometimes lingered too. When Ethan changed shirts, back turned but mirror catching the motion, David's gaze would flicker like a moth drawn to flame. His jokes, once effortless, now came out stiffer, rehearsed. His teasing carried a hesitation that had never been there before, as though he were afraid of his own words. And then there were the questions, always framed casually, tossed into conversation as though they were nothing. But Ethan noticed. He noticed the way David's hand twisted at his sleeve, the faint crease between his brows, the silence that always stretched too long after. "Ethan, you've never, liked anyone, right? I mean, not seriously?" David had asked one evening, sprawled across the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling instead of Ethan. Ethan, startled, had forced a laugh. What kind of question is that? Just curious, David muttered, though his ears had turned the faintest shade of red. Another night, while they walked back from the convenience store, with bags of ramen and soda in hand, David asked too casually, "Do you ever think about guys?" The words had slipped out quickly, but his voice had cracked, betraying a weight behind them. Ethan nearly dropped his bag. His heart stuttered in his chest as though someone had pressed pause and play too fast. He glanced at David, but his friend's gaze was fixed stubbornly on the ground, on the rhythm of his steps, as if afraid to meet Ethan's eyes. Each question left Ethan more confused, more restless. He lay awake at night, replaying David's tone, his expressions, the nervous tension that hung around him like a shadow. He wanted to believe it meant something, but he also feared hoping. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what made silence unbearable. Finally, one night, unable to take it anymore, Ethan asked. His voice was soft, almost breaking. "Why are you acting weird?" The question cut through the quiet hum of the room. They were sitting on Ethan's floor, half-empty mugs of tea between them, a blanket pooled near Ethan's knees. The window was cracked open, letting in the cool breath of the night. David froze, fingers tightening around the mug in his hand. His eyes lifted slowly, locking onto Ethan's. The intensity of that gaze was almost unbearable. Ethan felt pinned in place, stripped bare all over again, like the night of the towel incident. The silence that followed was thick, stretching seconds into eternities. Then David spoke. His voice was low but steady. "Because you're different now." The words hung in the air like thunder. Ethan's breath caught, pulse quickening. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. His hands trembled against the blanket, clutching it tighter as though for protection. Finally, he managed, "I'm the same. Nothing's changed." But David only shook his head. His eyes softened, but his jaw was tense. "Something has. At least, for me." The admission rippled through Ethan like a shockwave. His mind scrambled for meaning, for grounding, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath him. "For me." The words echoed, dangerous and tender all at once. Ethan's heart pounded so loud he was certain David could hear it. He searched David's face, desperate for clues. Was this a joke, a slip of the tongue? But there was no laughter in his eyes, no mockery, just raw honesty, stripped of its usual armor. "What do you mean?" Ethan whispered, though part of him already knew, or hoped, or feared. David looked down at his mug, then set it aside carefully, as though afraid of breaking it. His hands curled into fists on his knees. When he finally looked back up, his expression was pained, conflicted. "I don't know how to say it without messing everything up," he admitted. "But ever since that night, ever since I saw you like that, I can't stop thinking about it. About you." Ethan's world seemed to narrow to just the space between them. His skin prickled with heat. His lungs forgot how to breathe. Every part of him screamed to move, to speak, to react, but he sat frozen, caught between disbelief and the wild, reckless spark of something he had buried for years. David ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I know I shouldn't feel this way. You're my best friend. You're Ethan. But I can't pretend anymore. You're not just the same to me now. You're more." The words landed heavy, reshaping the air around them. Ethan's vision blurred slightly, not from tears, but from the sheer force of the moment. He wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to push the confession away before it could crack open his chest. But deep down, beneath layers of fear and restraint, a truth stirred, one he had been afraid to name. He licked his lips, his voice trembling. "David, you don't know what you're saying." "I do." David shot back, too quickly, too desperately. His eyes blazed with a determination Ethan had rarely seen. "I've been trying to ignore it, but it won't go away. I see you everywhere. I hear your voice even when you're not around. I can't stop." The silence that followed was deafening. The night outside pressed close. The hum of distant traffic, a faint backdrop to the storm raging between them. Ethan's chest rose and fell rapidly, his heart aching with confusion and longing. This was everything he had secretly wished for. And yet, now that it was real, it terrified him. He swallowed hard, words tumbling out before he could stop them. "If you say this, if you mean it, then nothing will ever be the same." David's reply was immediate, unwavering. "Good. I don't want things to be the same." Ethan's breath hitched. The truth hung naked in the space between them, fragile and dangerous, but undeniably real. For the first time, he realized that the world he thought he knew, the safe, steady friendship they had built, was shifting into something else entirely, something that could break them or save them. It happened during another late-night study session, the kind that always seemed to blur the line between exhaustion and intimacy. Ethan's desk was buried beneath a chaotic sprawl of papers, textbooks open to dog-eared pages, and half-empty mugs of coffee that had long gone cold. A soft playlist drifted from his laptop, barely audible, but enough to fill the silence with something other than the thundering of Ethan's heartbeat. David sat beside him, close, too close. His chair was pulled nearer than it needed to be, their arms brushing every so often in the limited space. Each accidental touch sent sparks racing under Ethan's skin, and he forced his gaze back to the notes, determined to focus. But focus was impossible. Not with David there. Not with the faint, intoxicating scent of his cologne wrapping itself around Ethan like a net. It was warm, clean, and dizzying, threading itself into every corner of Ethan's awareness until the words on the page blurred. He told himself it was nothing, just proximity, just late-night nerves. But the truth gnawed at him. The warmth of David's shoulder pressed into his, the weight of his presence filling the room, the way his body leaned just slightly inward as though caught between comfort and restraint. Ethan's pen hovered uselessly above his notebook, the ink drying at the tip, his notes left unfinished. His mind wasn't on literature or exam prep. It was on David, the curve of his jaw in the lamplight, the restless way his fingers tapped against the desk, the quiet tension that had grown thicker with every passing day. And then David spoke. "Ethan." His voice was low, uncertain, almost fragile. The single word carried enough weight to silence the music, to pull Ethan's gaze from the paper and fix it on him. David wasn't looking at the notes, wasn't pretending to read. His eyes were on Ethan, dark and searching, caught somewhere between fear and resolve. Ethan's chest tightened. "What is it?" he asked, though his voice came out softer than he intended, betraying the tremor beneath. David hesitated, his hand twitched, as though he meant to reach out but stopped midway, settling instead on the edge of the desk. His knuckles were pale, tense. "That night," he began, voice dropping lower, "when I saw you." His throat worked, swallowing hard. "I can't stop thinking about it." The words struck like lightning, illuminating everything Ethan had tried to keep in shadow. His breath caught, his pen slipping from his fingers and rolling soundlessly across the papers. He stared, stunned, unable to form a response. David pressed on, almost as if afraid silence would swallow him whole. "I've tried," he admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've tried to forget it, to pretend it didn't mean anything, but it won't go away. It's there every time I look at you, every time I hear your voice. It's like something changed, and I can't go back. Ethan's pulse raced, each beat heavy enough to shake through his chest. He wanted to look away, to hide from the intensity in David's gaze, but he couldn't. He was caught, pinned in place by the raw honesty spilling from his best friend's lips. The room felt impossibly small, the air too thick, every second stretching into an eternity. Ethan's voice faltered, trembling at the edges. He clutched the edge of his notebook, grounding himself. David, you don't know what you're saying. But David leaned closer, his eyes fierce now, as though afraid Ethan would slip away if he looked anywhere else. I do, he said, more firmly this time. I know it's not supposed to be like this. I know you probably hate me for it, but I can't lie to you anymore, not when it's eating me alive. The silence that followed was louder than any music. Ethan's thoughts collided, spiraling in chaos. This was the moment he had both dreaded and secretly longed for. Every glance, every awkward question, every lingering pause, it had all led here. And now that it was laid bare, he didn't know whether to run or to reach out. David, his name came out like a plea, fragile and unsure. We're best friends. If you say this, if you mean it, everything changes. Good. David's reply was immediate, his voice steady, despite the storm in his eyes. I don't want things to stay the same. Ethan's breath hitched. The distance between them had shrunk, impossibly small. He could feel the warmth radiating from David, could see the faint tremor in his hands, the vulnerability etched into every line of his face. For the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't just his burden to carry. David was breaking too, torn apart by something he didn't know how to name but couldn't deny. The music hummed faintly in the background, a low, steady rhythm to the chaos of their breathing. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. The world hushed, as if holding its breath for them. Ethan's hand shifted almost unconsciously, brushing against David's on the desk. The touch was fleeting, barely there, but it sent a shockwave through both of them. David froze, eyes flicking down to where their fingers nearly overlapped. His breath quickened, chest rising sharply. And when he looked back up, his expression was a storm of fear and hope. Ethan wanted to pull away. He wanted to retreat into the safety of denial. But something stronger held him there. Something that had been quietly building, hidden beneath years of laughter, of shared secrets, of nights just like this one. He couldn't lie to himself anymore. Not with David looking at him like that. Say something, David whispered, voice cracking under the weight of desperation. Please, Ethan, just say anything. Ethan's throat ached with the words he had buried for too long. His lips parted, but for a moment no sound came. Then finally, in a voice so soft, it was almost a confession, to the night itself, he said, "You're not the only one who can't stop thinking about it." The words hung in the air, fragile, shimmering like glass about to break. David inhaled sharply, eyes widening, his entire body stilling as though the world had stopped turning. Ethan's heart pounded so violently it hurt, but for once, he didn't care. The truth was out. The silence was broken. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the gravity of everything settling between them. And then David moved, slow and uncertain, but certain enough. He leaned forward, closing the last inches of space until Ethan could feel the warmth of his breath, the trembling anticipation that vibrated through him. Ethan didn't pull away. Ethan froze. The words hit him like a tidal wave. His hands trembled. David, don't... I thought I knew who I was, David continued, his words rushing out, raw and unfiltered. His voice cracked with the weight of it, each syllable trembling, straight, simple, certain. That's what I told myself. That's what I believed. But when I looked at you that night, his breath faltered. It didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something I shouldn't ignore. Ethan's heart pounded so loudly he thought David must hear it. His palms grew damp against the paper beneath them, the ink smudging faintly under his restless fingers. The world outside the window, the cold sweep of moonlight, the trees rustling in the wind, faded until only this room, this desk, this moment existed. Everything had narrowed down to the inches between them, and the words hanging in the air, fragile and dangerous. David leaned closer, and Ethan caught the faint tremor in his movements. His eyes, dark and unflinching, searched Ethan's face as though trying to read an answer hidden in the set of his jaw, the flicker of his gaze, the quickening of his breath. "Tell me to stop," David whispered, voice low, rough with restraint, "and I will." The space between them felt alive, humming, with a tension Ethan could no longer deny. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his lips parting, but no sound coming out. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to protect what they had, to avoid the risk of shattering it all. But beneath the fear was something else, something deeper, fiercer, a pull he couldn't fight. David's breath brushed against Ethan's skin, warm and unsteady. His hand shifted slightly on the desk, as if he wanted to close the distance but held back, waiting, always waiting for Ethan's word. Ethan's chest rose and fell rapidly, his pulse wild. He could end this with a single syllable. He could pull back, laugh it off, bury it in silence, but looking into David's eyes, he realized the truth. He didn't want it to stop. Not anymore. Ethan's breath hitched. For a heartbeat, fear battled desire, but then he didn't pull away. Their lips met, soft, hesitant, electric. It wasn't just a kiss. It was the breaking of years of silence, the unraveling of walls neither of them realized they had built. And when they pulled back, both breathless, both wide-eyed, David whispered, softly, "I don't think I'm as straight as I thought." After that night, nothing was the same. But for the first time, different didn't mean broken. David stopped pretending. He admitted the truth to himself. That feelings don't always follow labels, that love can surprise you, even if it comes in the form of your best friend. Ethan stopped hiding. He let himself believe that his years of quiet longing hadn't been one-sided, that maybe fate had been waiting for the right moment all along. Their friendship didn't disappear. It grew. It deepened. It became something new, something stronger. The story of Ethan and David isn't just about an accident. It's about what happens after, the courage to face what you feel, the choice to let love in, even when it terrifies you. What would you have done in Ethan's place, softly? Would you have turned away or leaned in? Comment your reaction below. Sweet, emotional, heartbreaking, or cute. Don't forget to subscribe for more BL webtoon breakdowns and yaoi manhwa story summaries, and check the description for full story links and more BL recommendations.